Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're going to be exploring the fascinating world of light, color, and perception through the lens of Rudolf Steiner's The Light Course, which he wrote back in 1919.
Oh, Steiner, always a fascinating, if challenging thinker.
He really was.
Mm.
Now, Steiner was a philosopher and scientist who was heavily influenced by Goethe, and he developed some really unique ideas about how we understand the natural world.
He was definitely ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, we're going to be asking some pretty big questions, like, what if color isn't actually a property of light itself, but arises from the interaction of light and darkness?
Intriguing.
Right. And how does our perception of the world shape our understanding of physics? Can we actually experience the world as a unified organism rather than just a collection of isolated parts?
Those are questions that have been pondered for centuries. It'll be exciting to see how Steiner approaches them.
Exactly. So let's dive in. One of the things that struck me right away is how Steiner challenges that traditional reductionist approach to physics.
Yeah.
He argued that, while scientific labels and concepts can be helpful, they can sometimes make us miss the actual experience of a phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely. He was really emphasizing that direct experience, that phenomenological observation.
Right, so instead of just saying, like, the ice melted, he wants us to actually visualize the process, right?
Exactly. To really slow down and pay attention to those subtle changes, like those tiny bubbles appearing as the ice transforms from a solid to a liquid. He wants us to engage all of our senses rather than just jumping to conclusions.
Like he's saying, we need to ground our understanding in direct experience, not just in abstract concepts.
Precisely. Steiner was very wary of relying too heavily on abstract thought, particularly mathematics, without connecting it back to our lived experience of the world.
And that leads us to his distinction between kinematics and mechanics, right?
Yeah.
Kinematics being the study of motion, which can be purely theoretical, and mechanics, which delves into forces, requiring us to actually interact with the physical world, mass and weight and all of that.
And he uses a really compelling example to illustrate this difference, the human brain floating in cerebrospinal fluid.
Okay, now that sounds interesting. So what's he getting at with that?
Well, think about it. The brain is a pretty heavy organ. It weighs,
Mhm.
around 1,250 grams. But because it's suspended in this fluid, it only exerts a pressure of about 20 grams on the skull.
Huh, I never really thought about it that way.
This buoyancy, according to Steiner, is incredibly significant. It allows what he called the etheric body, this kind of subtle energy body, to work more freely.
Okay, hold on. You mentioned the etheric body. For those listening who may not be familiar with Steiner's terminology, could you explain what he means by that and how it relates to the physical body?
Sure, so the etheric body, in Steiner's view, is like an energy field that interpenetrates and interacts with the physical body. It's kind of like a blueprint or a life force that guides the growth and development of the physical form.
So it's like we're living into the world with more than just our physical body. There's this whole other layer of energy shaping our experience.
Right.
That's pretty wild.
It is. And this concept of these multiple layers of reality, it's key to understanding how Steiner approached light and color. He diverged quite dramatically from the traditional explanations like Newton's prism experiment.
Oh yeah, the classic rainbow experiment we all did in school.
Exactly. Steiner suggested that color isn't simply a result of splitting white light, but arises from the interaction of light and darkness at the edges of an illuminated space.
Whoa, so he's saying that darkness isn't just the absence of light, but an active force that interacts with light to create color.
Exactly. It's not simply light reflecting off an object. It's about the interplay of light and shadow. It's much more dynamic.
That definitely challenges some basic assumptions about how we see the world.
It does. To help illustrate this, Steiner used the example of projecting a circle of light through a prism. Now, if that circle of light is large, what you see is mainly just a slight deviation with some color at the edges. However, if you project a small circle of light, you get the full spectrum of colors because those edge colors overlap, creating the rainbow effect.
So the classic rainbow we see through a prism isn't because white light contains all those colors, but because of how light and darkness interact at the boundaries of the light beam.
Precisely. Steiner called this interplay turbidity, a kind of darkness that's essential for color to arise.
Okay, turbidity. That's a new one. Can you break that down a bit more? It's a pretty intriguing concept.
Sure. So to make it a little bit more tangible, Steiner offers an analogy using what he called the astral body, which he associated with our feelings and emotions. He suggested that when the astral body interacts with the physical body, specifically the muscles, for instance, they appear gray because they kind of blend completely. But when the astral body interacts with the eye, it creates color because they retain a degree of independence.
So he's using this interplay of these subtle bodies to explain how color emerges from the interaction of different forces.
Exactly. And this brings us to the crucial role of the eye itself. Steiner emphasizes that the eye is an active participant in our visual experience, not just a passive receiver of light.
So it's not just light coming in, hitting our retina, and creating an image. There's more to it.
Oh, much more. Steiner goes into great detail about the structure of the human eye, highlighting the unique qualities of the aqueous humor, the lens, and the vitreous body, noting how they transition from the more inorganic to the organic. These elements work together, actively transforming the light into the images we perceive.
That reminds me of those mornings when you wake up and your vision's all blurry for a few seconds. Is that an example of this active process?
It certainly could be. That blurriness could be the result of the lens and the vitreous body, with their distinct origins and levels of vitality, if you will, sort of adjusting and focusing themselves in relation to one another before we can see clearly.
It's amazing how much is going on behind the scenes of something as simple as seeing. So we've explored light and color from Steiner's perspective, which is already pretty mind-blowing. But he didn't stop there, did he?
Not at all. Steiner also had some really fascinating insights into the nature of sound and how it interacts with the world. He challenged the conventional view that sound is simply a product of, air vibrations.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. What did he think was happening with sound?
Well, he proposed this idea of sound actually being sucked in from beyond the physical space, drawn in by a vacuum created by vibrations.
Wait, hold on. He's saying that it's not just the air vibrating that creates sound, but that there's something else being drawn in. Could you unpack that a bit more? This idea of sucking in sound seems a little counterintuitive, to say the least. How does that differ from, the traditional understanding of sound waves?
Absolutely. Think about the phenomenon of sympathetic vibration, like when you pluck a string on one instrument and a string tuned to the same pitch on another instrument starts to vibrate in response, even though they're not physically touching. Steiner suggests that this kind of sympathy of phenomena, this interconnectedness, might extend beyond the physical realm and apply to sound as well.
So there might be a deeper connection between events than we realize.
That was Steiner's suggestion.
Interesting.
And this exploration of these invisible forces leads us to Steiner's examination of electricity. He actually connected electricity to the human will, differentiating between static electricity, which is generated by friction, and galvanic electricity, which flows continuously.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. Light, sound, electricity. It's like Steiner is suggesting that there's this deeper, more dynamic reality underlying these forces than traditional physics can explain.
You're picking up on a key theme in his work.
It's fascinating.
He observed that while galvanic electricity appears to operate in the inorganic realm, it also reveals a connection to physiological electricity, the tension between muscle and nerve in living organisms.
Oh, wow. So he saw parallels between the seemingly inanimate world of electricity and the forces at play in living beings.
Exactly.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And it makes you think about all of those groundbreaking scientists like Crookes, Lenard, and Röntgen, who were working with cathode rays, X-rays, and radiation. Were they also uncovering aspects of this deeper reality?
It's an interesting question.
It is, isn't it? And Steiner argued that while wave-based calculations are certainly useful, they don't really capture those qualitative aspects of phenomena like light and electricity. Relying solely on wavelength and wave theory, he believed, limits our understanding of these forces.
So where do we go from here? If these traditional models aren't enough, what's the alternative?
Well, Steiner suggested that we need to expand our thinking, to move beyond just quantitative analysis and include the qualitative aspects as well. Develop new ways of perceiving and understanding the world that bridge the gap between, say, the physical and the spiritual.
This brings us back to Steiner's admiration for Goethe's approach to science.
Yeah.
Goethe, who really saw color as arising from this interplay of light and darkness, viewing darkness not as the absence of light, but as an active force.
Right,
Oh, that's
exactly.
pretty revolutionary.
It is. And Goethe's concept of red nature and blue nature, where red represents light working in darkness and blue represents darkness working in light, well, it provides a framework for understanding color as this dynamic interplay of opposing forces.
And it's fascinating to consider that modern physics, while not really explicitly acknowledging Goethe, is starting to echo some of those ideas about light and color, you know.
It is. It seems like we might be on the verge of a new understanding of light and color that incorporates the insights of these early pioneers. But to get there, we might need to rethink some pretty fundamental assumptions about how we observe and interpret the world around us.
Okay, that was a lot to take in. Can we recap the key takeaways so far?
Absolutely. So, from Steiner's perspective, color arises from the interaction of light and darkness, not just from the properties of light itself.
Oh,
Our perception plays a crucial role in shaping our understanding of the physical world, and there's a deeper, interconnected reality beyond what traditional physics can fully explain.
those are some seriously revolutionary ideas. It's definitely made me think about things in a whole new way,
Hmm.
but there's still so much more to explore,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
What's coming up in part two?
Well, in part two, we'll be delving deeper into the implications of Steiner's ideas for our understanding of perception, the nature of reality, and the future of scientific inquiry. Get ready for more mind-bending insights.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into light, color, and perception. Last time, we were talking about how relying solely on wavelengths and wave theory to understand things like light and electricity might not be the whole picture.
Right. We were discussing Steiner's idea that those traditional models, while useful for some things, don't really grasp those more qualitative aspects of those forces. It's like, I don't know, trying to describe what chocolate tastes like just by analyzing its chemical makeup. You're missing something, you know?
Exactly. You're missing that experiential dimension. And that leads us right into Steiner's point about how our own perception plays a huge role in shaping how we understand the world around us. We can't just be these detached, objective observers. We bring our whole being to the act of perception, our senses, our feelings, even what Steiner called our etheric and astral bodies.
Oh yeah, those subtle layers of our being.
Right.
So it's like the observer isn't really separate from the observed. There's this dynamic interplay happening, and that actually shapes what we call reality.
That's a great way to put it. Steiner was really challenging us to consider that our consciousness isn't just passively taking in information, but is actually a force that's participating in the creation of our experience.
Wow, so if our consciousness is actively shaping reality, what does that mean for, like, scientific inquiry? Do we need to change how we do science?
It definitely raises some big questions, yeah. For one thing, it suggests that the lines between the observer and the observed might be blurrier than traditional science has assumed. Steiner even proposed that as we expand our consciousness through things like meditation, we might actually be able to access levels of reality that are hidden from our normal senses.
So it's not just about developing better instruments to observe the world with, but about refining our capacity to perceive.
Exactly.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is radical, but it also opens up so many possibilities. You see, Steiner believed that our scientific understanding is ultimately limited by our level of consciousness. He suggested that as humanity evolves spiritually, we might actually develop new senses, new ways of knowing, that could revolutionize our scientific understanding of the universe.
It makes you wonder what kind of scientific discoveries might be possible if we could tap into those deeper levels of perception.
Right, it's mind-boggling to think about. Steiner was hinting at a future science that goes beyond just analyzing the material world, a science that delves into the interaction of consciousness and these subtler realms of the etheric and the astral, those forces that shape our reality.
And this takes us back to Goethe's concept of red nature and blue nature, which we touched on earlier. Could you remind us what that means and how it relates to our understanding of the world?
Of course. So Goethe, he saw color as more than just a visual phenomenon. It was a reflection of deeper forces in nature. He observed that red tends to be associated with, expansion, warmth, activity. Think of fire, blood, a blooming flower. And blue, on the other hand, tends to show up in phenomena that are related to contraction, cold, passivity. Things like the sky, water, shadows.
So these colors actually represent underlying forces that are constantly interacting. It's like they're telling a story about what's happening in the world.
Exactly. Goethe called this the polarity of color, this dynamic interplay of red and blue, light and darkness, which he saw as shaping everything around us. And Steiner, he took this idea even further, suggesting that this principle of polarity shows up everywhere, not just with color.
Okay, give us some examples. Where else do we see this polarity?
Well, we see it in the positive and negative charges of electricity, the attraction and repulsion of magnets, even in the tension between, say, opposing viewpoints in our own thinking. Steiner suggested that this polarity, this interplay of opposites, is woven into the very fabric of existence.
So it's like this constant dance between opposites,
Mhm.
expansion and contraction, light and darkness, that creates the world as we know it.
Right.
It's a very different way of looking at things than that traditional mechanistic view that sees everything as just static and separate.
It is, and this leads us to another key takeaway from Steiner's work, which is the interconnectedness of everything. He suggests that everything in the universe is ultimately connected, part of a vast web of relationships that extend beyond what we can see or touch.
He mentioned this earlier, too, with that idea of sympathy of phenomena, where seemingly unrelated events might be linked in ways we don't fully understand.
Exactly. And Steiner challenges us to consider that our thoughts, our feelings, our actions may have a ripple effect that reaches far beyond our immediate sphere of influence. He even suggests that we're all part of this giant interconnected organism, and what we do affects the whole.
Wow, that's a powerful concept.
It is.
It makes you realize the importance of, like, cultivating awareness and responsibility for our thoughts and actions if they can actually impact the world in ways we might not even realize.
Exactly. And this interconnectedness also extends to the different layers of reality, not just the physical world. Steiner describes the physical world as just one layer of a multidimensional reality that also includes, the etheric, the astral, and the spiritual realms.
Earlier, you mentioned that the etheric body is that subtler, energetic counterpart to the physical body. Can you tell us more about the etheric realm, like how it relates to our physical world?
Sure. So Steiner describes the etheric realm as this realm of life forces, the blueprint, you could say, that underlies the physical world. It's where the processes of growth and development are guided by invisible forces.
So it's like the etheric realm is this invisible hand shaping and guiding the physical world.
That's a good way to think about it. Steiner suggested that every physical thing actually has an etheric counterpart, an energetic template that guides its form and function. He even pointed out that we can sometimes perceive the etheric realm indirectly, like, when we wake up with a blurry vision.
Oh, interesting. I always wondered why my vision was blurry for a few seconds after waking up. Are you saying that might be a glimpse into our own etheric body at work, adjusting our vision?
It's an intriguing possibility. You see, Steiner's work is all about encouraging us to look beyond the surface of things, to explore these deeper forces that shape our reality. He's inviting us to engage in a more holistic kind of science, one that embraces the qualitative, the experiential, the interconnectedness of everything.
This has been a lot to digest,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly thought-provoking. So what else should we keep in mind as we explore Steiner's ideas further?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious, and open to new ways of seeing the world. Steiner's work is an invitation to question our assumptions, to observe the world with fresh eyes, and to really explore the deeper meaning and interconnectedness of everything.
It sounds like a journey of discovery, not just an intellectual one, but one that involves our hearts, our intuition, our imagination.
Beautifully said. And as we embark on this journey, let's keep in mind Steiner's words. The true human being is not only a being of knowledge, but also a being of will, a being of action. So let's take these insights and actually apply them in our own lives, working towards a world that reflects the beauty, the wisdom, that interconnectedness that we've glimpsed in Steiner's work.
That's a powerful call to action. So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep expanding your consciousness. You never know what amazing things we can discover and create together. Welcome back to our deep dive into Rudolf Steiner's The Light Course.
It's been quite a journey,
It really has. We've been exploring how our perception shapes our understanding of reality.
uncovering those hidden connections in things that seem completely separate, like light and sound.
Even electricity.
Exactly.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's also incredibly inspiring. If our consciousness really can influence reality, like we were talking about last time, what does that even say about us as human beings
Yeah.
and our potential?
Well, that's a big question, and it's one that Steiner's work really gets into.
Okay, good.
He really delves into the nature of human consciousness and how it relates to the cosmos as a whole.
Okay, so what's he saying?
Well, Steiner describes the human being as a microcosm of the macrocosm.
Okay, hold on. Microcosm, macrocosm. What does that even mean?
Basically, it means that we mirror within ourselves the same forces and principles that are at play in the universe.
So we're like these miniature universes, containing within us the potential for everything that exists out there.
That's the idea. Steiner suggests that we're not just physical beings, but spiritual beings as well, and that our consciousness is like a bridge between those two realms.
Okay, so how does that work?
He describes the human being as having a physical body, which we all know about,
Yeah.
an etheric body, which we talked about a bit in part one,
Right.
an astral body, and then an I, or ego. And that's the core of our individual consciousness.
We talked about the physical and etheric bodies, but what about this astral body? What's its role in all this?
Well, the astral body is associated with our feelings, desires, and emotions.
Okay.
It's the realm of our inner world.
So our thoughts, images, dreams.
Exactly. And Steiner suggests that the astral body isn't just some internal thing, it's actually a powerful force that can influence both our inner and outer reality.
Wait, hold on. You're saying that our emotions can actually have an impact on the world around us. How does that work?
Steiner proposed that our thoughts and feelings and actions actually create energetic patterns in this astral realm, and those patterns can influence the events and circumstances in our lives. It's a little bit like how our mood can affect the atmosphere in a room, you know?
Yeah.
Like if someone walks into a room and they're really angry, everyone can feel it.
Right.
And Steiner is saying something similar is happening on a much grander scale with the astral body.
Okay, that's a powerful concept. It makes you think about the kind of energy you're putting out into the world.
It does. And Steiner's model of the human being goes even deeper than that. He suggests that we're not just individuals. We're actually part of this larger spiritual reality, a realm of spiritual beings and hierarchies that are influencing the evolution of both humanity and the cosmos as a whole.
Okay, now we're getting into some really mind-bending territory here.
Yeah.
Spiritual beings and hierarchies. For our listener who might be hearing about this for the first time, what does that even mean?
Well, it's definitely a complex idea, but essentially Steiner's suggesting that there are levels of reality beyond what we normally perceive.
Okay.
And these levels are inhabited by beings with different degrees of consciousness and spiritual evolution. Now, these beings aren't necessarily physical in the way that we understand it. They exist in these subtler realms, those etheric, astral, and spiritual realms we've been talking about.
So there's this whole invisible world, a spiritual dimension, and it's interacting with our physical world.
That's one way to understand it. Steiner described these spiritual beings as having different roles and functions. You know, some are associated with the creation and maintenance of the physical world, while others are involved in guiding the spiritual development of humanity.
It's a very different perspective from that materialistic view that says, consciousness is just a product of the brain.
It is. Steiner's work challenges us to really expand our understanding of what it even means to be human.
Okay, so if we're these spiritual beings who are evolving, what's the end goal? Like, where are we headed?
Steiner describes the goal of human evolution as developing higher consciousness, realizing our full spiritual potential. He suggests that as we evolve, we become more aware of our interconnectedness with all beings.
Okay.
We develop greater compassion, wisdom, and we can actually participate more consciously in the evolution of the cosmos.
That's beautiful. It's both inspiring and kind of daunting at the same time.
It is. And Steiner didn't just see this as some abstract, philosophical idea. He believed it had practical implications for how we live our lives, how we raise our children, how we shape society as a whole.
So it's about putting these ideas into practice.
Exactly. He was a strong advocate for what he called a holistic approach to education that would nurture every aspect of the child, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually.
And that's the foundation of Waldorf education, right?
It is. Steiner's whole vision for education was based on understanding the different stages of child development and providing learning experiences that engage the whole child. So Waldorf schools, they really emphasize creativity, imagination, hands-on learning, and a sense of wonder and reverence for the natural world.
It's an approach to education that seems like more relevant than ever, in a world that's so focused on testing and memorization.
I agree. And Steiner's influence actually goes far beyond just education. He had insights into agriculture, medicine, the arts, social renewal, you name it. And his ideas continue to inspire people all over the world who are looking for, a more holistic, more meaningful way of life.
It's amazing to think that the ideas we've been exploring in this deep dive, starting with something as simple as light and color,
Yeah.
can have such far-reaching implications. It really touches on everything. How we see ourselves, our relationship to the world, the future of humanity even.
It really is remarkable. It's a testament to the breadth and depth of Steiner's work and his ability to connect all these different areas of knowledge, science, art, spirituality into a really compelling worldview.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the light course, where do we go from here? What can we actually do with all this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to just stay curious and open to new ways of seeing the world. Steiner's work is an invitation to really question our assumptions, to observe the world with fresh eyes, and to explore that deeper meaning and interconnectedness of everything.
It sounds like it's a journey of discovery, not just an intellectual one, but one that involves our hearts, our intuition, even our imagination.
Beautifully said. And as we embark on this journey, let's remember Steiner's words. The true human being is not only a being of knowledge, but also a being of will, a being of action. So let's take these insights and actually apply them in our lives, working towards a world that reflects that beauty, that wisdom, that interconnectedness that we've gotten a glimpse of through Steiner's work.
That's a powerful call to action. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep expanding your consciousness. You never know what amazing things we can discover and create together.